the name and the weight of the player from the edit boxes. Recall that the constructor that's required to instantiate requires the name and the weight. Looking at 3.2.1, we get the name, we get the weight from the edit boxes. A conversion is required here. And then we instantiate the object. And that is done by calling the constructor and giving the constructor the values that it requires. And then a message is just displayed to say that the object has been instantiated. 3.2.2, calculate BMI. Use an input dialog to enter the height. So the first thing you would do is use an input dialog to get the height. Because we want it as a real, a conversion will take place, and that's stored in a variable called height. And then call the relevant method. We've written a method called calculate BMI. That was the input height, and then what's cut off here is the calling of the method, which is actually the critical part. So the name of the method, if I recall, was calculate BMI. Let's quickly just go up into our unit to check the name of that method. There it is, calculate BMI, and it wanted the height. So in this case, we are going to say obj player dot calculate BMI, and this method wants the height, and we have the height, which is what we send in to the function. And recall that the function is called through the object. You will also notice that obj.toString, the toString method is being called. Then on a new line, the BMI is then being printed. And the reason for that, that's how the output is required. The first three values is obtained from the toString and then the BMI. A float toString is required here, since this value is an integer value, is a real value, a float value. So a float toString is required. So that is the code that needs to go in at this point that has been cut off. 3.2.3, update score. The user must select the score from a radio group. So you've got a radio group, and then we call the update score that was written in the unit to perform that task. So here is the radio group. You check the index of the radio group. If the index is 0, it means the first value was selected, in which case the score is 2. And with that score, we then call the update score. Just looking at the way this is being called, if I had to ask you the question, is this a procedure or a function? You should be able to tell me. And the answer is, it is a procedure. The reason it's a procedure, it's because of the way it is being called. Remember functions? In the previous video, I indicated a function is called in 3 ways. 1, it returns a value and it can be called in a rich edit. 2, it can be assigned to a variable. And 3, a function can be called in a condition like an if statement. So here, it's being called simply by its name through the object. That has to be a procedure. and this is the parameter that it required. Else, if the item index is 1, that means the second radio button was selected, in which case the score is 3, and we're calling the method with the value of 3. If it's not the first radio button, not the second, else means it's the third, in which case the score was 5, and the update score procedure is called. After that has been called, then we need to update the actual score, and actually we're not updating the score. The update already took place using the update score. Here we are displaying the score. So this is just a message, and here we are getting the score. So what's cut off here is the get score. Maybe that can be seen if I do. No. So there's a get score. And remember, to call the get score, it has to be done through your object obj player. Obj player dot get score. Get score is a function that returns the score. Three point 2.1, the final question. Eligible for selection. Here, write code to call the method that returns a message indicating whether the player is eligible or not. So that's quite straightforward. It needs to be displayed in this label, and you call up. It's a function. The function returns a value, and we are taking that value and we are storing it in the caption of the label. This concludes the solutions for question 3 of the 2019 paper.